Sometimes, the things that haunt us don't wear masks. Sometimes, they don't even have faces. In the stillness of the desert, in the glow of firelight, in the quiet of a mother's voice, fear takes many forms. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true stories. Stories of people who thought they understood the world around them until something dark reached out from the silence and changed everything. Let's begin. I've lived in Nevada my whole life, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the desert doesn't whisper to everyone, but once it speaks to you, you'll never forget its voice. For me, it started as a hobby. Just a group of us kids still in high school back then, chasing the thrill of forgotten places. We weren't vandals or rebels. We didn't drink or tag walls or break into stores. No, we were explorers, the kind that carried cameras, flashlights, and a stubborn sense of curiosity. There was me, James, my loudmouth best friend since 3rd grade, and Charles. Charles was different, quiet, observant. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was always something worth hearing. He had this uncanny ability to find places no one else could. Old service tunnels, abandoned motels, forgotten mining camps. He never told us how he found them. And honestly, we didn't ask. One Friday evening, right as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the desert in gold and rust, Charles sent us a screenshot. It was from a sketchy-looking Instagram account with barely any followers. Blurry photos of rusted staircases and cracked concrete. One post caught his attention. A caption scrawled beneath a photo of a dark cave mouth, half swallowed by the earth. Dozens of abandoned mine shafts in the Mojave Desert, if you know where to look. I remember the look in Charles's eyes when he showed us. Not excitement, obsession. We met up the next morning. I had a beat-up Jeep Wrangler with bald tires but a heart of steel, perfect for desert roads. We loaded up with snacks, flashlights, batteries, masks. Charles even brought a small first aid kit like we were prepping for war. No address, no map. Just a pin drop Charles had marked in the middle of nowhere. As the city gave way to sand and shrubs, the road turned from pavement to dust. James complained from the back seat, muttering that we were wasting gas and time. I mostly ignored him, partly because I agreed, but mostly because Charles hadn't steered us wrong before. Still, the longer we drove, the quieter we got. The GPS signal vanished, cell bars disappeared, even the occasional cactus seemed to stop growing. There was nothing. Just empty. After nearly an hour on dirt tracks, the Jeep rattling like it might shake itself apart, James cursed and pointed out the window. "There," he said. "Is that a building?" I squinted. At first it looked like more rocks, but as we got closer, I saw it too. A wooden frame, half collapsed and half buried in the slope. Splintered beams jutted out like broken ribs. The opening, though partially caved in, still gaped like a mouth waiting to swallow something. Or someone. We parked. No words, just silence. Even James was speechless. Charles stepped out first, walked to the entrance, and dropped a pin on his offline map. Then he turned to us and said simply, "Told you." That mine, it didn't just sit there, it loomed. We geared up. I could already feel the air changing, colder somehow, even though the sun still beat down from above. Charles handed us masks, the kind you'd wear in a wood shop, and nodded. I wasn't sure if it was for dust or something else. And as we stood there, staring into the yawning black, I felt something stir deep in my chest. Not fear, something quieter, older, like the desert was watching. The entrance groaned as we stepped through, like the mine didn't want us there, like it was exhaling after years of being left alone. We descended slowly, one foot at a time, careful on the loose slope. The ground was covered in powdery sand, fractured rocks, and old planks that had no business still being intact. It was colder than I expected, not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that settles into your chest and stays there. It felt wrong, like the air hadn't been disturbed in decades. Charles led the way, as always. He didn't talk, didn't joke around. He just kept moving forward, flashlight sweeping across the timber walls, occasionally stopping to study rusted bolts or water-stained marks on the beams. He was in his element. James, on the other hand, wasn't quiet because he was focused. He was quiet because he was tense. I could hear it in his breathing behind me, shallow and irregular. Every time his boot scraped something on the floor, he muttered a nervous apology under his breath. To us. To the mine. I wasn't sure which. Eventually, the narrow shaft leveled out and opened into a larger tunnel, about 6 feet high and just wide enough for the three of us to walk shoulder to shoulder. Old rails ran along the center, nearly buried under decades of dirt. We took the left fork, no real reason why. Just instinct. It felt like walking through a grave no one had ever visited. We passed discarded scraps of wood and iron, chunks of broken machinery, rusted bolts, a busted lantern, everything coated in dust. It was so quiet I could hear my own pulse. I wasn't claustrophobic before that day, but something about being down there, deep under layers of rock and silence, makes a man realize how fragile he really is. Then we heard it, a sound, faint, distant, but there. It came from deeper down the tunnel. At first, I thought it was just the wind shifting above us, maybe a bat flapping through a crack in the rock. But then it came again. Skrrrrp. Long, drawn out, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze. Charles had already stopped moving. James looked at us, his face pale in the flashlight glow. No one said anything. We just stood. Charles made a motion. Kill the lights. One by one, we turned them off, and the tunnel disappeared. Total blackness swallowed us. I don't know if you've ever been in a place without even a sliver of light. No stars, no screen glow, nothing. But it messes with your mind. Your thoughts start echoing. And that sound, it came again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Closer? I held my breath, listening, my ears strained like they were trying to see. Whatever it wasn't rushing us. It was slow, deliberate, confident. My mind began reaching for explanations. A raccoon, a trick of the echo, some rusted tool falling from the ceiling. But I didn't believe any of those. James shifted and his flashlight flicked on for a split second. Just a flash of white beam against the wall, and then darkness again. But that was enough. The scraping stopped, and in its place came silence so deep I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then, clang. A metal-on-metal crash from the dark. Not near, but not far enough either. And right after that, a scream. Not a scream like a person in pain. A scream that didn't sound fully human, like metal tearing, like something ancient and furious had been disturbed. I felt it in my ribs. It wasn't just noise. It was a force. We ran. No one said to. No one planned it. We just turned and ran as if our lives depended on it. And maybe they did. They saw a kid in handcuffs and thought they knew the ending. Just another young black man with no defense, no chance, no voice. But I didn't walk into that courtroom to beg. I walked in ready. While they smirked, I studied. While they dismissed me, I listened. And when I finally spoke, the silence said everything. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was standing up for every story like mine that never got heard. If you feel drawn in, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we have a story that will leave you speechless. I could feel the stares before I even reached the defense table. That heavy kind of silence that settles over a room when people think they already know who you are and what you're guilty of. I was 19 black and standing alone in a courtroom packed with people twice my age. That was enough for most of them to write me off before I ever spoke. The Los Angeles County Courthouse had that familiar courthouse chill. Too much air conditioning and not enough warmth. I adjusted my collar and kept my hands in my pockets, not because I was nervous, but because I knew what was coming. I'd studied trials like this for years. I just never expected to be the one on the docket. The judge, Walter Grayson, looked at me like I was a minor inconvenience between him and his golf game. He didn't see a kid who knew case law like the back of his hand. He saw what he expected to see. A young black man accused of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. Another statistic. Another name on a file. He leaned back in his chair, drumming his fingers, barely interested. "You think you're some kind of legal expert?" he said, half laughing. "This isn't a debate club, kid." Laughter bubbled in the courtroom, small but sharp. The bailiff cracked a smile. The stenographer shook her head. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, didn't even try to hide his amusement. He looked at me like I was just a warm-up to his real cases. I didn't flinch. They all thought I was about to beg for mercy or trip over my own words. What they didn't know was that while other kids were out partying, I was reading trial transcripts. While my friends played video games, I was memorizing Supreme Court decisions. My mother worked as a paralegal. I grew up listening to stories of shortcuts, bad arrests, and buried truths. This courtroom might have been theirs on paper, but I knew it better than most of them ever would. Grayson sighed and opened the file like he was skimming through a menu. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I've got a tea time at 2. The gallery laughed again. But something shifted. Quiet, almost invisible. I smiled, not wide, just enough to know something they didn't. He'd already made his first mistake, and I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. The hospital visit was mostly a blur. They gave me a tetanus shot, cleaned out my foot, and picked out what felt like 100 splinters. I didn't say much to the nurse. How do you explain that you weren't just injured, but changed? I couldn't walk properly for a few days. James stayed quiet the entire ride home. Even Charles, usually unreadable, seemed shaken. He kept fiddling with his phone, checking the pin he'd dropped, like he was trying to convince himself it had all been real. But what haunted me most wasn't the scream. It was the silence after. That deep, cavernous silence that seemed to swallow our voices and our thoughts. Like the mine itself was alive and listening. I kept replaying it over and over. That sound of something being dragged. The panic in my chest. The feeling of being hunted by something that never showed its face. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sound I couldn't name. My dreams were worse, always underground, always running, and always that scream. A few days after we got back, James admitted something. He'd lost his wallet near the entrance. He didn't want to say anything at the time, didn't want to go back for it. But the guilt started eating at him. Maybe it had fallen when he was helping me into the car. Maybe before. He couldn't remember. I didn't want to go back. God, I didn't. But we did. Charles still had the offline pin. The three of us loaded up into the Wrangler again, silent the whole way. The roads were just as empty, the desert just as dry. But everything felt different. We didn't go inside, not even close, just hovered near the opening, like kids afraid of getting too close to the deep end of a pool. James searched for 10 minutes before giving up. His wallet was gone, but my shoe, it was there, torn, dirty, mangled, like something had bitten into it, not chewed, bitten. Entire chunks were missing, and clear arched teeth marks indented the rubber. I stared at it for a long time, not because it proved anything, but because it reminded me that we weren't crazy. Something had followed us, or watched us, or maybe even waited for us. I didn't take the shoe. I left it there, like an offering or a warning. We didn't speak on the ride home, not about the mine, not about the shoe, not about the thing we'd left behind, or the part of ourselves that never came back out. Here is part 5, The Meaning of the Desert Mine, a quiet, emotional reflection that brings the story full circle. It's crafted to resonate deeply with a mature audience, leaving room for thought, feeling, and quiet chills. I haven't gone urban exploring since that day. The gear's still in my garage, dusty flashlight, cracked helmet, even the half-used pack of masks Charles handed me. I see them sometimes when I'm grabbing tools or sweeping out the back. I never touch them. It's not just about fear. Fear fades eventually. The sharp edges dull. The nightmares space themselves out. But what doesn't fade is the question, what was it? And worse, why was it waiting? I've replayed every second of that day in my head 100 times. The mine, the dragging, the scream, the shoe with the bite marks. Even now, I find myself rationalizing. Maybe it was a wild animal. Maybe our minds were playing tricks. Maybe we just scared ourselves. But every time I think that, I remember the silence, the way the air watched us, the way the walls breathed, the way the dark didn't just hide something, but held it. I've tried talking to Charles about it, but he brushes it off. Says we were lucky, that's all. James doesn't even want to mention it. He's the one who really changed, more careful, quieter. He doesn't laugh the way he used to. As for me, I still go out to the desert sometimes, but not to explore, just to look, to sit, to listen. There's something about that emptiness, the way it stretches on without end. You start to understand why some people call the desert a holy place, or a cursed one, maybe both. Sometimes, when the wind picks up, I think I hear something. Not a scream, just the scrape of something old, moving beneath the sand. I don't tell many people this story. Most wouldn't believe it. And maybe I wouldn't either if I hadn't lived it. But if you've ever walked into a place and felt something deep, quiet, ancient, watching you, then maybe you understand. And if you don't, just promise me one thing. If you ever see an opening in the side of a hill out in the Mojave, half covered in sand and silence, don't go in. What if the darkness doesn't follow you underground? What if it's waiting for you under the stars? Our next story takes us deeper into the desert, a couple searching for peace and beauty in the vast stillness of the Mojave. But what they found was fire, and something watching them from the edge of the flame. I've never been much for 5-star resorts or bustling city vacations. Give me a tent, a campfire, and a wide open sky, and I'll show you what real peace feels like. Tiki and I had only been dating for 6 months, but it felt longer, in the best way. We were both the outdoorsy type. She grew up around forests in Oregon. I grew up in southern Arizona, so we had our fair share of dirt under the fingernails and stars in the eyes. Long drives, quiet nights, that kind of life. One evening after a long week, she looked at me from across the kitchen table and said, "Let's disappear for a while." She didn't mean permanently. She just meant away. from the buzz, the notifications, the headlines and deadlines. So we packed up the truck with the basics: tent, 2 coolers, a jug of water, a camping stove, a few rolled up blankets, and a playlist full of 70s acoustic rock. I found a spot online about 3 hours out. Remote, dry desert land, legally open to campers, far from any towns or light pollution, no cell service, no other people, just us, the land, and the sky. We left early Friday morning. The road was long, empty. For the last hour, we didn't see a single car. It felt like the world was peeling away behind us, layer by noisy layer, until all that was left was dust and light. The desert stretched in every direction: flat plains, soft golden hills, the occasional scrub brush rustling in the wind like it remembered something old. By the time we reached the clearing, the sun was already dipping low. We found a flat patch just past a ridge, set up the tent, and gathered rocks to form a little fire ring. The air was still warm, but the wind hinted at the cold that was coming. Desert nights are like that: honest, sudden, sharp. We lit a small fire and shared a drink. She tucked her legs under a blanket, and I wrapped an arm around her. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd both been missing. The first night felt like a reset button on life. A soft breeze, a blanket of stars, her head on my shoulder, and the scent of desert sage carried by the wind. For a while, it felt like we were the only 2 people left on Earth. And that wasn't a scary thought. It was perfect. The second day started like a dream. We woke with the sun, soft orange spilling over the ridge like honey. Tiki made instant coffee over the fire, while I stretched out on a folding chair, staring up at the endless blue. We spent the morning wandering around the area, barely speaking, just holding hands, pointing out strange rock formations and dried riverbeds. The world felt simple again. That night, the stars came out like a curtain of silver dust. No noise, no headlights, no neighbors. Just us and the fire, flickering and warm, casting shadows that danced along the side of our tent. I think that was the moment, the last time I felt completely at ease, because just past midnight, we heard it. It was distant, so faint we almost missed it. A long, low howl, not quite animal, not quite human, not threatening, just strange, almost sad. Tiki sat up a little. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "Probably a coyote." She didn't argue, but she didn't relax either. We listened. It didn't come again. I tossed another log on the fire, and we laughed it off. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was the silence playing tricks on our minds. But something about the sound stayed with me. It wasn't just what I heard. It was the way everything stopped afterward. The wind, the crackling fire, even the bugs. Like the desert had held its breath. The next day passed without incident, though I noticed we stayed a little closer to the tent, didn't wander as far. Every once in a while, Tiki would glance at the horizon as if expecting something to rise from it. That night, it happened again. Same time, same drawn-out howl, echoing somewhere far behind the hills. Only this time, it didn't fade right away. It lingered, hung in the air like fog. Tiki squeezed my arm. "That's not a coyote." "I know." We sat in silence. The fire crackled. The stars blinked overhead like they were watching too. I wanted to be brave for her. Wanted to say something like, "We're fine," or "It's just the wind." But I didn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure it was the desert I was hearing. It felt like something else, something deeper, something that had been here long before us and wasn't thrilled we had come. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I remember exactly what pulled me from sleep. Footsteps, software, slow, steady. At first, I thought it was a dream, the kind where your mind plays tricks, stitching together sounds you're not actually hearing. But this wasn't that. It was real, too rhythmic, too purposeful. Crunch, pause, crunch. I held my breath. Tiki was still asleep beside me, curled under the sleeping bag. The only thing between us and the night was a thin layer of nylon and polyester. I strained my ears. The steps didn't move around the tent. They stopped. Just stopped. A few feet away. And then, after a long, excruciating silence, I heard it. Click. The sharp flick of a lighter. A soft flame glowed orange through the fabric of our tent. My heart hammered in my chest. The light hovered at about waist height, like someone was standing there, holding it, watching. It didn't move, just stayed there, burning. Then it began to sway, left, right, left again, like it was being shown to us. I couldn't move, not from fear, but from something colder, something older, like my body understood what my mind didn't. I wasn't in control anymore. I was prey, and I knew it. Then the glow expanded. The flicker turned into a glow, the glow into a blaze. I heard a whoosh, then felt it. Heat. Real, immediate, searing. Whatever they were holding had been dropped, and it was burning. "Tiki!" I shouted, finally snapping out of it. "Wake up! Get up now!" She gasped as the smell hit her, burning nylon, plastic, and something darker, more chemical. Flames raced across the side of the tent, like they'd been waiting for permission. We scrambled, blind, barefoot, fumbling for anything we could save. I unzipped the tent and threw our bags out onto the dirt. Tiki grabbed the water jug and dumped it toward the fire, but it barely slowed the spread. Half the tent was engulfed. The air inside had turned thick and choking. I kicked at the collapsed side to create a way out, then grabbed her wrist and pulled. We tumbled into the sand just as the roof caved in behind us. The fire crackled louder now, greedy, feeding on everything we'd brought. I snatched up the flashlight, scanning the darkness around us. There was no one there, no movement, no sound, just blackness beyond the firelight. Empty, silent, as if whoever had been there was gone. But I didn't believe it. Neither of us spoke. We just started throwing things into our arms, half-packed bags, shoes, whatever hadn't been touched by flames. We moved like animals, panicked, instinctual, the kind of survival you don't learn, you just do. "We need to go," I whispered. "But where's the truck?" Tiki's voice cracked. I looked around. The fire had lit up everything nearby, but out past the rocks and brush, it was pure black. No road, no trail, just guessing. I picked a direction and started walking, fast. She followed without a word, her hand clutching mine so tight it hurt. And then it came again, that same howl. Only this time, it didn't stop. Another joined it, then another. They weren't cries from one animal, they were calls, and they were behind us. I didn't look back. I just squeezed Tiki's hand harder and picked up the pace. Something had tried to burn us alive, and now, whatever had started the fire, we moved fast, but it didn't feel fast enough. Our boots crunched over loose dirt and stone, stumbling through the desert night with nothing but the narrow beam of my flashlight and sheer adrenaline. The fire behind us flickered low against the hills now, casting long shadows that danced and stretched like fingers reaching after us. But the sound never stopped. Those howls, or whatever they were, kept coming, first from behind, then to the left, then to the right. Each one felt closer, angrier, like we'd broken some unspoken rule just by surviving. "I don't know where we are," Tiki said between gasps. "We didn't mark anything. We're just guessing." I didn't answer, because she was right. The desert wasn't made to be walked at night. Landmarks you thought you knew disappear in the dark. Every rock looks like the last. Every direction feels wrong. There were no stars to guide us. Clouds had rolled in, silent and thick, smothering the sky. I swung the flashlight wildly, hoping for the glint of metal, the shape of the truck, something. But all we found were more bushes, more sand, more endless black. Then another scream, closer this time. Not just heard, but felt. It reverberated in my ribs. I turned off the flashlight. "What are you doing?" Tiki whispered, panicked. "If they're out there, I don't want them seeing the light," I said. We stood completely still, surrounded by darkness, and that's when we heard it. Footsteps behind us. Crunch, pause, crunch. I tightened my grip on her hand. "Run!" We ran, no plan, no direction, just ran. Branches whipped at our faces. Sand flew into our shoes. My flashlight bounced in my hand as I flicked it back on, desperate to spot anything familiar. And then I saw it, a shape, long, angular, the truck. "I see it!" I shouted. "Straight ahead!" We sprinted, lungs burning, legs shaking. Tiki tripped on a patch of loose gravel, but scrambled up before I could even reach her. We reached the truck like it was salvation. I fumbled with the keys. My hands were slick with sweat and shaking, but the door opened. Tiki jumped into the passenger seat. I shoved the key into the ignition and turned. For a second, just one heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life. Headlights burst into the darkness, sweeping across the desert, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw them. Figures, tall, thin, motionless, just outside the reach of the beams, watching. Then they were gone. I slammed the pedal down, wheels spinning in loose sand before catching. We lurched forward, bouncing violently over the desert floor. I didn't care. I didn't stop. We didn't speak. Not for miles. Not until the blackness began to thin, and the soft glow of a highway light appeared like a lighthouse in a storm. Only then did I glance at Tiki. Her hands were still clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Her eyes were locked on the mirror behind us. We made it home the next afternoon, hours later than planned, but not for any lack of speed. We just didn't speak for a while. We drove in silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind you sit in when words feel too fragile to hold what you've just lived through. When we finally pulled into my driveway, Tiki didn't get out right away. She stared straight ahead, eyes still wide like she was waiting for something to step out from the shadows and finish what it started. I placed a hand on hers. She didn't pull away. That night, we slept with every light in the house on, doors locked, curtains drawn. The faintest sound outside, a branch tapping glass, a car passing down the block, made my body tense up like I was back out there again, lost in the dark with the fire at our backs. We called the local sheriff the next morning, filed a report, gave the GPS coordinates, as close as we could remember them, said someone tried to set our tent on fire in the middle of the night. The deputy took notes, nodded slowly, promised to send a ranger out that way. But his face told me everything I needed to know. He'd heard things like this before, maybe not often, but enough to know we weren't crazy. He didn't say what he thought it was, but he also didn't say it wasn't something. Weeks passed, the bruises faded, the burns healed, the nightmares less frequent. Tiki started sleeping through the night again. I stopped checking the locks 3 times before bed. But something inside me, something deeper than instinct, never fully settled. Not because of the fire, not because of the screams, because whoever or whatever was out there that night wanted us to know. Not just that they were there, but that we didn't belong. I used to think the desert was beautiful, peaceful, a place to escape the noise of the world. Now I understand, it's not quiet because it's empty. It's quiet because it's listening. And if it decides you've stayed too long, it'll let you know. If you've ever sat under the stars and felt the weight of something ancient pressing in from the darkness, you know what I mean. And if you don't, count yourself lucky. Just don't ignore the silence. Sometimes it's not peace. Sometimes it's a warning. Some fears chase you through the desert night. Others ride with you quietly, in the back seat of memory. Our final story isn't about what's out there in the dark. It's about what's buried inside the people we trust the most. Because sometimes the most terrifying secrets live in the ones who protect us. My mother has always been an enigma wrapped in a smile. To most people, she's just Rosa Martinez, kind eyes, quiet voice, a woman who makes perfect arroz con pollo and laughs at the wrong parts of movies, the kind of person who waves at neighbors she doesn't know and gives away homemade tamales every Christmas. But to me, she's always been something more, not just because she's my mother, because she's hiding something. I never used to think that way. When I was younger, I believed what my dad always told me. She had a rough childhood. Let the past stay there. So I did, for years. I let the silence sit like a stone in the middle of our family's story. And she was good at keeping it that way. Changing the subject, laughing at awkward moments, giving non-answers that somehow sounded warm. But as I got older, things started to feel off. She never spoke about her parents. I don't even know their names. She never showed me childhood photos, claimed they all got lost during her move from Mexico to the States. She wouldn't even say exactly where she grew up. Just a border town, as if that explained everything. I remember one family gathering when I was 16. My aunt asked about her father, and my mom laughed and said, "My dad's side were the politicians, my mom's side were the crooks." I could never tell which was worse. Everyone chuckled, but I didn't, because that was the first time I realized I'd never actually heard her speak about either side before. Not seriously, not with names, not with faces. Then there was that night when I was 10. I had woken up thirsty. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I was tiptoeing down the hall to get a glass of water when I heard her voice, soft and sharp, whispering in Spanish. The living room lights were off, but I could hear her clearly, like she was standing right by the window. She kept repeating one name. R. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was talking about him. Her voice was low but tense, like the words carried weight. I flipped the light switch on, and she didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised, just stared at me with a glare that stopped me in my tracks. "Go back to bed," she said, and I did. But I never forgot that night, or that name. It was supposed to be just another long drive through the desert. I'd graduated college a year earlier, and life had started to feel like one big waiting room. Jobs I didn't care about, conversations that felt recycled. So, when an old friend from school invited me to spend the weekend out near the Arizona-Mexico border, I said yes without hesitation. The drive was long and empty, one of those stretches of highway where the road doesn't curve for miles, and the landscape looks like it's been paused. Just sand, brush, and that pale blue sky. I'd already burned through most of my music, so I started cycling through my contacts, calling people to pass the time. Eventually, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. She always did. We talked about soccer, the Champions League. She had strong opinions about Real Madrid's midfield, and I pretended not to be surprised by how much she still kept up. Her voice was relaxed, familiar. It made me forget how alone I actually was out there, until I saw the trucks. 2 of them, pickup trucks, older models, parked diagonally across the road ahead. No signs of a crash, no flashing lights. Just there, like they belonged, blocking the way. I slowed down instinctively. "Hold on," I told my mom. Then a 3rd truck appeared behind me in the rearview mirror, closing the gap. My heart dropped. 3 men stepped out of the vehicles, all armed. One had a shotgun resting on his shoulder, like it was just another day in the yard. Another had a pistol tucked visibly in his waistband. Panic isn't loud. It's quiet, like a thread pulling tight inside your chest. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My phone was still on the dashboard, still connected. My mom was still there, but I hadn't said anything. The man with the shotgun approached my door, tapped the glass twice. He didn't need to say a word. I knew what he wanted. I raised my hands and stepped out slowly. The other 2 flanked him, staying just far enough back to make me feel boxed in. They barked something in Spanish, fast, sharp. I caught cartera, wallet. I don't speak Spanish. I always hated that about myself, especially in that moment. I'm Mexican American. My mom tried when I was young, but I never listened. Now, I'd give anything to understand even half of what they were saying. They took my phone, my keys, my wallet, everything. One of them climbed into the driver's seat of my truck. He didn't drive away. He just sat there like he was inspecting it. The desert was hot, but I felt cold. I stood there helpless, surrounded by strangers with weapons, stranded in the middle of nowhere, and completely out of control. And then I realized my mom was still on the phone, still listening, and everything changed. The man in my truck was reaching for the dashboard. I watched through the side mirror, frozen, my mouth dry. He moved slowly, finger hovering just above the glowing screen. He could see the call was still active. My mom's name lit up in soft white letters. And then he did something I didn't expect. He didn't hang up. Instead, he paused, his head tilted slightly like he was listening. And then he spoke. Not to me, to the phone. I couldn't hear what he was saying, not with the windows closed, but I saw his lips move, slowly at first, then more urgently. The other 2 men stepped closer, curious now. One leaned in, whispering something. The man in my truck raised a finger. Wait. That's when I knew. He was talking to my mother. I had no idea how. I had no idea what she could possibly say that would change anything. But the mood shifted. The man's shoulders relaxed. His face changed. He said something again, this time slower. He glanced back at me through the windshield, expression unreadable, somewhere between confusion and recognition. And then I saw it. He repeated a name. R. The same name my mother had whispered all those years ago in our living room. His lips moved deliberately, as if confirming it, like my mother had said it, and he needed to make sure he'd heard it right. R. I didn't know what that name meant, still don't, but the way it landed on his face, it was like a switch had been flipped. Everything changed. The man inside the truck said a few more words, then hung up. The driver's side door opened. He stepped out. He looked at me, not threatening, not apologetic, just calculated. He handed me back my keys, then my phone. Then, one by one, my wallet and everything else. They took nothing except the cash, maybe a few 20s. And then, with no words, no warning, they walked away. All 3 trucks, mine included, started their engines. The men climbed back in and drove off into the desert, not toward the road, away from it. No license plates, no parting threats, no explanation. Just dust and silence. I stood there, keys in hand, unsure if I'd just been rescued or recruited. I climbed into my truck. My hands were still shaking. I stared at the screen. My mother's name gone now. The call disconnected. But the questions, they were only beginning. I didn't call her right away. Not because I didn't want answers, God knows I did, but because I didn't know what to do with them once I had them. I drove the rest of the way to my friend's house in silence. The road, the desert, the sky, all of it just noise now. My hands trembled on the wheel. My heart never quite settled. That night, I sat in the guest room, staring at my phone. She hadn't called me back. Did she think I'd ask questions? Was she hoping I wouldn't? The next day I called her. "Hey, mijo," she answered like nothing had happened. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You talked to them," I said. She paused. "I talked to someone. Yes." "What did you say?" "I told them I was tracking your phone, that if they hurt you, I would call the police." "Mom," I almost laughed. "That's not what happened." Silence. "I heard him say a name," I continued. "R. You've said it before. I remember." Another silence, longer this time. "Sometimes," she said finally, "the past stays buried for a reason." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." It wasn't anger I felt. It was something worse. Distance. Not the physical kind, but the kind where someone you've loved your whole life starts to look like a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Are you in danger?" I asked. "No," she said too quickly. "Not now." "You know them." She didn't answer. "You knew them." Still nothing. And that was it. That was all I was going to get. She changed the subject, asked if I had eaten, if I'd gotten enough sleep. I let her. Not because I wasn't angry anymore, but because, somehow, I understood. Whatever that part of her life was, whatever world she once belonged to, it had reached across time and distance to protect me. And maybe it still wasn't done with her. I haven't brought it up since. Every now and then, when we talk, there's a pause, a slight tremor in her voice, like she's expecting me to ask again. And I think she knows. I never will. Because here's the truth. I'm scared of what she might say. Not because I think she's evil, but because I think she's capable of more than I've ever known. There's a kind of love that doesn't look like love. It looks like silence. It looks like secrets. It looks like 3 armed men walking away from your son without explanation. I used to think love meant transparency, full access to someone's story. But I don't think that anymore. Now, I think love sometimes means carrying the burden so the people you love never have to know what it weighs. Whatever, or whoever my mother used to be, I believe she buried it for me, and I believe she'd dig it up again in a heartbeat if she had to. I still don't know who R is. I don't know what kind of life she left behind when she crossed that border alone. I don't know what they owed her, or what they feared. But I know this. When that man saw her name on my phone, something changed. Not because she threatened him, but because of who she was. Who she still is, maybe, and that terrifies me. But it also makes me grateful, because whatever world she came from, she didn't bring me into it. She built a new one for me. Quiet, safe, ordinary. And if that world ever tries to reach me again, I know now, without a doubt, she'll be the one who stands in its way. Not all love stories are romantic. Some are forged in silence, bound by blood, and protected by secrets that will never be spoken aloud. If your mother ever gave you a life she never had, Don't ask why, just thank her. 3 stories, 3 different kinds of fear. One beneath the ground, one in the fire, one passed down from mother to son. The desert doesn't care who you are. It only reveals who you truly become when you're left alone with your past. And the scariest part? Sometimes the desert lets you walk away, but it never forgets your name.